Congressman Adam Schiff joins us now. First, Congressman, obviously you represent a district in California, and now two horrific mass shootings in, Saturday night to yesterday. I mean, it's just incredible. Monterey Park, Half Moon Bay. Talk to me about that, about the gun issue, and about your reaction as a California legislator.
It's devastating. I represented Monterey Park for over a decade. It's now in the neighboring district, but I know the people of the park. What a beautiful, wonderful, close community it is. I was there just a couple days ago and saw the grief, and I can only imagine what Half Moon Bay is going through now. And there are reports now of another mass shooting, including a fatality in Oakland, California, all within a matter of days. It just shows this scourge of gun violence isn't going to go anywhere unless we do something about it. And this is what really adds so much anger to the misery of these shootings, which is we can do something about this. We can do something about this. We can't stop all of it, but we can stop a lot of it. And we can do so by universal background checks. We can do so by strengthening mental health care. We can do so by banning assault weapons and extended ammunition clips. I've been carrying a bill now for a decade to remove the immunity that the gun industry has, the only industry in America that is immune from liability, even when they act negligently. So we're not powerless here. And this is why this is so maddening. We don't have to live this way, and we can't live this way.
Now, Congressman, bear with me. I'm going to ask you to wait for a few moments because there is breaking news, and I want to get you to react to it, because this involves apparently a small number of classified documents that were found in the Indiana home of former Vice President Mike Pence. And obviously, this is enormously significant. We've now had, of course, what happened with Donald Trump, with the former president, a large number and resistance to turning them over for more than a year. Then, of course, 5 batches of classified documents. We don't know the amount of pages, and only one that is listed as top secret found in Joe Biden, home and transition office, or now post-vice presidency office. For Vice President, now President, of course, Biden. And now Peter Alexander is joining me, our chief White House correspondent, with the news about President Pence. We've got a number of letters here between his representative to the National Archives and the National Archives. How did they find them?
Well, so, Andrea, we just obtained these 2 documents, 2 letters sent by the former Vice President Mike Pence's attorney to the National Archives. And I want to walk you through some of the details that we're learning. The first is dated January 18th. But according to this document, it says, following the reports about documents being found at the home of President Biden, that the office of the former Vice President Mike Pence did its own search. And on Monday, January 16th, they engaged their outside lawyers with experience in this process to do it. And according to one of the letters we received, they did discover records that appear to be, in their words, a small number of documents bearing classified markings that were, in the words of this letter written by the former vice president's attorney, inadvertently boxed and transported to the personal home of the former vice president at the end of the last administration. It goes on to say that Vice President Pence was, quote, unaware of the existence of sensitive or classified documents at his personal residence. As you note, his personal residence right now remains in Indiana. It says the vice president understands the high importance of protecting sensitive and classified information and stands ready and willing to cooperate fully with the National Archives and any appropriate inquiry. So a couple things to try to digest right now. First, we heard about former President Trump, who refused to detail any of this, provided some documents. Then there was a search warrant that was executed where they found 103 documents. Then it was about President Biden, who initially didn't detail any of the discovery that was made until it was first reported by the media. And then there's been the drip, drip, drip of new revelations, but they did go immediately to the National Archives. And here it was only after media reports that we then heard from the office of Mike Pence. They didn't come to the media to be public about it. They went to the National Archives, exactly what the President Joe Biden did as well. But it just adds another layer to this story. And notably, the former Vice President Mike Pence in recent weeks has been very critical about the handling of the investigation into President Biden right now, and basically has suggested that there's a double standard between the handling of the investigations of both the former president, President Trump, and Joe Biden.
And this only came out because of a media leak.
That's exactly right. There was a leak within the last hour, and within the last 30 minutes or so, we obtained these two documents between the lawyer for the former vice president and the National Archives. We'll keep reading through, and we'll give you more info as we gather it.
Peter Alexander on the story, Adam Schiff. Congressman, you were the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Before that, you had been on the Intelligence Committee. You handle classified documents all the time in a SCIF, in the Capitol. First of all, I want to ask you your reaction to this about Vice President Pence. And then I want to ask you about the way documents are handled. So let's talk about what happened with Vice President Pence.
Well, I think both those questions are interrelated. It certainly appears now that there's a systemic problem with former occupants of the presidency and vice presidency having classified information at their homes when it shouldn't be there, or at their libraries or their university repositories. So this now appears systemic. And, as the chair and new nominated ranking member of the Intel Committee, once again, we're going to have to now ask for another assessment by the intelligence community of any risk posed by the presence of these documents somewhere they shouldn't be. But I think there also needs to be a review of what happens when people leave that office, the presidency and vice presidency. Again, there look to be very important differences here. Trump resisting returning the documents, fighting it, his lawyers misrepresenting that they had. Here, it appears the former Vice President Pence and President Biden have been fully cooperative and turning the documents over when they're discovered. So important differences, but nonetheless, there appears to be a systemic problem here.
And speaking to that problem, did you take documents home?
No, and this is what's so astounding, I think, for all of us on the Intelligence Committee. I never take classified documents to my house. I don't know any reason why people would. I am so paranoid when I go into the SCIF and out of the SCIF to make sure that I've got no electronics on the way in, that I've got nothing with me on the way out. I am very, very careful about it, and I would assume that everyone else is. But clearly, there's a problem here.
You said you've been nominated to be on the Intelligence Committee, but there's talk among Republicans that they will ban you and others who are active in the impeachment process and also who had been critical of former President Trump. Do you have any indication from the Speaker as to whether you're going to be able to serve, as former chairs of the Intelligence Committee have always served on the committee, in a ranking position or another position once their chairmanship is over, when parties change hands?
I'm grateful to Leader Jeffries for once again nominating me to be the lead Democrat, the ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee. It's a serious committee with important responsibilities always, but particularly now when one of our allies, Ukraine, is at war with one of our adversaries, Russia, when China is potentially menacing Taiwan, and Iran, of course, with its nuclear program. This is not a time to be messing around, playing the kind of games Kevin McCarthy is. And I'm deeply concerned not only that he appears willing to interfere with the independence of the Intelligence Committee, but also his establishment of this new select committee with the Orwellian-sounding name of on the weaponization of the federal government that will have access to classified information. He's putting, I think, some of the most irresponsible of his members on that new select committee. That is only going to cause the Intelligence Committee to further distrust Congress, be reluctant to share information with Congress, which means that we can't, as policymakers, do what we need to do to protect the country. So it's all related to McCarthy's, weakness as a speaker and his reliance on Marjorie Taylor Greene, among others, his reliance on Donald Trump, among others, and his willingness to do their bidding.
And if he tries to stop you from being on the Intelligence Committee, what options do you have? He's the Speaker.
I will be working with Leader Jeffries to figure out where I can play a role, make sure that we continue to hold him accountable. If McCarthy believes this will somehow stop me from pointing out when they abuse their power, when they endanger the country, it's not going to stop me at all. And I will simply work with Leader Jeffries to find new ways to continue holding them to account.
I do want to ask you, because there's so much talk that you're considering, if a Senate seat opens up, if Dianne Feinstein were to step down, would you throw your hat in the ring?
I don't have anything to say at this point. Not ready to make any announcement today, but I'll have more to say on the subject soon. Senator Feinstein and I, as you know, Andrea, have worked together very closely on intelligence issues, on issues affecting California. We're both working hard now to make sure that we can recover from these storms. That's been both of our focus over the last few weeks. But I'll have more to say on the Senate very soon.
Adam Schiff, Congressman, thank you very much.